On their first day of business in 1973, this company delivered just 186 packages to 25 American cities. Today they sort, transport, and deliver 3.5 million express packages to 200 countries every day. Michael L. Ducker, Chief Operating Officer and President of International for FedEx Express, is this week's Leader on Leadership.
Knowing when to ask for help is critical when you're in a leadership position.
It's getting the best out of people. That's the essence of leadership.
Major funding for Leaders on Leadership is provided by Greenleaf Trust.
Helping people manage their wealth, accumulate assets, and preserve those assets for generational continuity implies trust. We are sitting down on the same side of the desk as you are. We're planning for your financial needs.
Additional funding provided by the Wayne State University School of Business Administration.
Welcome to Leaders on Leadership, here with a student audience at St. Andrews Hall on the campus of Wayne State University. I'm Larry Fobes. Michael Ducker joined FedEx in 1975, has been with them his entire career. Thanks for being here, Mike.
Thank you very much, Larry. I'm delighted to be here.
Now, when you joined the company, it wasn't the typical management development program that a lot of CEOs and presidents start on. How'd you join the company?
Not at all. Well, actually, I just gotten out of school, needed a job of almost any type. Had a friend that was working at FedEx, and he said, this little company may be one that you'd like. So I applied, and I was hired the same day as a cargo handler, unloading packages from small aircraft. And that was in 1975. And we weren't making any money at that time. But so I had two other jobs that I was working. And
it's kind of the typical way a lot of us go through school.
A lot of us go through school that way. So I had income from those other two jobs, and this job, there was just something about FedEx, even in early days, that you thought that this company was really going somewhere.
Now, the company in those days had been serving customers for only a couple of years.
Right.
And 75 was the first year it actually turned a profit. Give us a
Right.
thumbnail sketch of what FedEx was like in those days as a company.
Well, it was a young, energetic group of people. We were really galvanized around the vision of a young chairman. He was 28 when he started the company. Plus, we were changing the way the world worked, which we've used as a tagline once before, because the business model had never included a totally integrated system like the one that we were building. And so it was an exciting time, and everybody loved the work, thought it was unbelievably important, and we were young and friends, and it was just a very exciting time in our company's history.
Now let's fast forward to today. FedEx is a completely different company, and it does its business through a whole series of operating companies. Give us a sketch of what the company is today and how FedEx Express fits into that whole picture.
Well, it is vastly different today, as you well know. We are, FedEx Corp is a holding company with different operating companies specifically focused on specific markets. And we believe we're better able to execute because we're focused on specific markets. So our corporate mantra is we operate independently, we compete collectively, and we manage collaboratively. And so every one of those operating companies has a CEO, and they're focused on their particular part of the business. So FedEx Express is time sensitive.
That's your business.
That's our business. Exactly. Those are the time sensitive. That's the mothership where it all began. And that has the international business in it, 220 plus countries around the world that we serve. The FedEx Ground Company is a North American company primarily. It's surface-based transportation. And then FedEx Freight Company is a large LTL provider, so the palletized larger freight. And then we have FedEx Services, which has sales, marketing, information technology, and a sub-company under that called our FedEx Office, which is our retail location.
Yeah. Now, about 18 months after joining the company, you became a manager, right?
Exactly.
And your leadership career took off. And about the time you're becoming a manager, the company's exploding in growth, starting into the ramp that sometimes got up to 40% a year growth. Looking back, do you think that was a better leadership development time than if the company had been more stable because you had to go through all the chaos and change?
Well, I say all the time that in leadership in general, most of it is situational. There's no playbook, and so you're sorting things out on the fly. As long as you've got basic tenets and basic principles of leadership behind you, you're able to adapt and change to those situations. So I think the crucible that we were thrown into the early days, and it was trial by fire in a lot of cases, helped refine and honed how we respond to customers and to markets, and made us a much better company. But now, would we do it differently today? Probably.
Now, do you think that now that you're CEO of FedEx Express and President of International, do you think you lead differently because you've grown up with the company and you had that whole experience differently than if you'd come in as an external hire 2 years ago as COO from a different firm?
Oh, I think absolutely. There is something about growing up with your company and you are absolutely committed and passionate about it, and you've seen it develop over the years, that it becomes very much a part of you, and you're able to embrace it in a wholly different light. We have a culture that we think is unique in the world. Our corporate philosophy is people, service, profit. And in that order. In that order. And it's a virtuous circle if you think about it, though. It's really, we hire the best and the brightest employees. We give them a good place to work, fair compensation, and they in turn serve our customers, and our customers are pleased to pay us. We make a profit. We reinvest that in the virtuous circle. And so that's why we keep it in that order, because those people are the ones that deliver the outstanding service.
And do you think that you are more sensitive to that because you were one of those people in the day?
I think so. I think it's very helpful for someone to have started it doesn't have to be that way in all cases, but I think it's very helpful for someone to have started and understand the basics of the business. And from that point forward, then they can really empathize with customers. They understand what the goals and the visions are, and they're a part of making the company a success at a whole lot of different levels. And I think, frankly, it's been very useful for me in my career, I'll say that.
Now, in 1984, the company expanded to Asia and Europe, and then you spent a lot of your 90s living outside the US, Milano and Hong Kong and Singapore. For new international leaders, or people who are international leaders, how's the experience different if you live in the market that you're leading as opposed to doing it by email and telephone and flying in once in a while?
Well, as far as I'm personally concerned, I have been blessed to live in a lot of different and unique places around the world and manage in those locations. And I think that the experience is irreplaceable in terms of being on the ground, living with the teams that you're asking to perform the job, and leading them toward a common vision and goal. It helps you to understand the breadth of a company much better when you're sitting at headquarters making those kinds of decisions at another level. And you find out some things are pretty common around the world in terms of what people want and need, and you find out how to motivate and lead differently in different cultures. And I think it's very important as we become much more globally interdependent.
So leadership changes depending on the culture that you're in?
It does, not the basic tenets, but how you inspire, motivate, galvanize people around a common theme. Those sorts of things changes in different parts of the world.
Now, I've known people who had some really exciting international assignments, and then the experience kind of went bad on them. They came back, while they were overseas, they fell out of the spotlight back at headquarters. When they came back, a little disillusioned because they missed the excitement of the foreign market. How did you keep when you were out living in all these different places, how did you keep your personal brand growing back at Memphis?
Well, I think one of the chief ways that you do is create results when you're in your job, and that's every leader and manager's job. Basically, we get paid to create results, and you communicate your story for what your business is doing in those offshore markets, and then, frankly, you're inspired around an overall corporate vision, and that's your passion. And so I think keeping your eyes focused on the goal, helps you to create your own identity back with corporate headquarters.
Then, while you were doing all this living around the world, especially in Asia, you went off and back to school and did an MBA with the Kellogg School and the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology.
Right.
Why do an MBA in two different locations? Isn't learning accounting in one country the same as someplace else?
It's an interesting story in that at that stage of life, I mean, one would say I was already the president of one of the largest, fastest growing divisions. Why would you go back and get an MBA? And so I talked to our chairman about it, and he said, it causes you to think differently. And it really and truly did. And it was a tough thing, and you've done it yourself. I mean, I started back to school, and I was certainly the grandfather of the group, the oldest guy in the class. But I was with such young and bright people, and they were energetic and enthusiastic, and they were from all over the world. And we went to school in Hong Kong, and so we did classes 2 weeks in a row, weekends, and then we had teams working together. And the things that came out of those teams truly were fruitful for all of us.
Now, getting ready for this interview, I looked at the 2010 annual report, and I saw something I don't see very much these days, is I saw a company that had been profitable throughout the whole recession.
Yes, yes.
You also talked in that report about shock absorbers to help the company accommodate the inevitable downturns in the cycle. Are you saying that you started preparing for the bad days when the days were still good?
I don't know that you prepare for the bad days when the days are still good, but I think what you are is ever adaptable and flexible in your business to things that might occur, because there are always externalities. And when we started in this downturn, we had several basic principles. One is that we're going to protect our culture and our people. Number two, that we would protect our service that we were providing for the customers, because that's how we built our brand. Number three, we would streamline our cost and try to match it to the revenues that we were experiencing at that time. And four, very importantly, is that we would find areas to invest, and so we would have growth later, because the overlying principle was to emerge from this recession stronger. And we knew that all recessions end, and we want a stronger company when we finished.
Now, as a stronger, you're one of the stronger companies in your business, in the delivery, freight, logistics business. But there's a lot of companies that do it, but some of them do it quite well. Are you just selling as a company delivery and freight and logistics, or are you selling something else that differentiates you from the competition?
Well, we think we're certainly differentiated, and a lot of it goes back to a thing that we call the Purple Promise. And that Purple Promise, simply stated, is that we want to make every customer experience outstanding. And frankly, our company, in its DNA, is very focused on the customer, because we know the customers pay the bills, and we know they tell us what kind of markets that they want to enter into, what kind of services they want. And frankly, all of our team members all around the world are uniquely interested in the demands and the needs of their customers, and they understand the Purple Promise. In fact, Thursday night, we'll have a Purple Promise Awards ceremony at our company where we will award the top stories that come out for extraordinary customer service. So we feed that culture, we reward that culture because we think it's an absolute imperative for our success.
Thanks for being here, Mike.
Thank you very much.
We're going to take a quick break, but when we return, we'll talk with Mike Ducker about leading FedEx Express into the future. Welcome back to Leaders on Leadership. Joining us today is Michael Ducker, COO of FedEx Express and President of FedEx Express International. As I said, I looked at your 2010 annual report, and I love the cover. You made a promise to the company made a promise to the shareholders. You ain't seen nothing yet.
Oh, we say that all the time, and I believe it's absolutely true.
Now, because FedEx and FedEx Express have been such a growth machine, it's hard sometimes to remember that it's less than one working career. The founder is still chairman CEO.
Absolutely.
How do leaders of any company, FedEx or other, who've had this 3 decades of phenomenal success, keep from becoming complacent, keep themselves reinventing the vision so that it fits today's times?
I think that one of the chief things is that you're never satisfied, and that doesn't mean that you haven't done a good job, but you can't be complacent or satisfied with your success. You have a vision of where you want to take this company, and that's one of the basic tenets of a leader, is to have a vision. And we've had a strong entrepreneur, founder, chairman that is able to not only have the vision, but communicate it clearly, concisely, and onboard people with the division, with that vision over the course of years. And very importantly, I think that you know, the only thing constant, we say it all the time in our company, the only constant around here is change. And you have to be adaptable and flexible. And frankly, I think, you know, life is changing all the time, and so are markets and so are companies. And how you react to it is the most important thing. And we have been very good at reacting, being adaptable to our circumstances.
Now, sometimes individual leaders react poorly. You wrote a recommendation for a book called Derailed, written by Tim Irwin.
Yes.
Where he talked about people who had been successful leaders and then did something wrong. The leadership failed and they derailed. And he wrote that off as a character failure, as much leadership. They got a little bit too much power, unbridled power, a little bit arrogant. How do leaders keep themselves from being derailed?
Well, I think one of the most important things, if you think about 4 or 5 of the most important things that I see in leaders, is number 1, it's character and integrity. Secondarily, vision. Third, they've got to communicate and have strong relationships. They accept responsibility for mistakes, and they're absolutely committed to what they do. Those are 5 things that I think are very important. But it starts with the integrity and the character, and that's the most important element, I think, for a leader. And frankly, if there are times that you get off course, if you make your decisions in leadership based on principles as opposed to the popular decision of the day, that you usually be on the right course. Those principled decisions.
What would be a popular decision that would be wrong?
Well, there are any number of examples. To overlook an obvious impropriety would be absolutely wrong. To go with a popular decision on the basis of one working group that you knew would damage the company, to accept an intolerable risk, even though it was a popular program you wanted to do, that could be wrong.
Now, half your job is for president of international for FedEx Express. And the conventional wisdom says that to be successful in offshore markets, other markets, that you need to worry about language and culture and that sort of thing. You said in a speech at Stanford a couple of years ago that there's a couple of other things in your business that come up. Let's talk about those. First one, border regulations. Since 9/11, border regulations have changed for security. They've always been unwieldy. How do we come up with efficient border regulations that are also safe? And what can CEOs do to change the current state?
Well, I think, frankly, there are a lot of nuances to doing business in all these different countries around the world. But I think if you're involved in the regulatory process and trying to put forth good ideas for regulations with government officials, with businesses in partnership, then you can craft good regulations. I think one of the most probably overlooked important things, though, if you think about doing business in 220 countries, is frankly, you need local people that understand local markets. And one of the uniqueness, the most unique things about FedEx is, for example, in China, our head of China operations is obviously Chinese, but he's also a 25-year veteran of FedEx. So he's able to blend the unique corporate culture that is FedEx with the national culture of China, and that is a very powerful combination in business. And that's one of the reasons I think we've been successful in the international marketplace.
Now, the other thing you talked about is protectionism. Your company is enabling world trade on an unprecedented scale, and everyone talks about wanting to increase exports. But every export is also someone else's import, which leads to talk about jobs going away, which leads to protectionism. In this global marketplace that we're in, are there really winners and losers, or does the whole market come up or down?
I think on a large scale, it is a win-win. Are there places where there are some affected individuals? Yes. But let's look at some statistics. 95% of the world's consumers live outside the United States. 77% of the purchasing power resides outside the United States. And if you think about 87% of the global growth today is outside the United States. And you talked about those imports. I think sometimes we underestimate the value of imported goods has to a typical American family. The price reductions that have come from many of those imported goods and from the benefits of free trade are between $1,300 to $2,000 per year. Frankly, that's enough to pay a semester of college tuition, if you put it in normal terms. Trade supports some 38 million U.S. jobs and a huge piece of the GDP. So I think, while there are some impacts on it, in the main, global trade and this global interdependency that we have, if we take advantage of it, can be a very good thing for our company, but more importantly for our country.
I've got one last question for you, Mike. Let's put you in a hypothetical crossroads of two trends. NASA is busy looking at colonies on the moon. They've got to support the space station, and they're also looking to engage private business in the space business. Let's assume, hypothetically, you leave FedEx Express, start a new company, and you win the contract to be the supply manager for the space station and the moon colony. How are you going to take the leadership lessons from the high-volume FedEx Express business and apply them in this really specialized, targeted business?
Well, I think keeping to the basic tenets of what we talk about for leadership. I mean, your job as a leader is to create the vision and to inspire others to things that they wouldn't have normally done. And so no matter what the situation that you're placed in, if you keep those things truly at the center of what you're doing, I think you can inspire them in that new environment that you've created. People really want to follow a good leader, and It's been said many times before that people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And when you care about your people, you communicate with them, you can inspire them, then you can manage in that environment and you can lead in that environment.
Thanks for being here, Mike.
Thank you very much.
Please join us again next time for another edition of Leaders on Leadership. See you then.
Major funding for Leaders on Leadership is provided by Greenleaf Trust.
Helping people manage their wealth, accumulate assets, and preserve those assets for generational continuity implies trust. We are sitting down on the same side of the desk as you are. We're planning for your financial needs.
Additional funding provided by the Wayne State University School of Business Administration.
An encore presentation of Leaders on Leadership is available on demand for viewing at DetroitPublicTV.org.